So, Jungle Cruise is directed by Jean Collet Serra. It stars Dwayne Johnson and Emily Blunt, and it's about this adventurer played by Emily Blunt who hires Dwayne Johnson, reluctantly through a comedy of errors, of course, to basically find this flower that can cure a lot of things, apparently. And we're supposed to go off on this new adventure. So obviously, Jungle Cruise is based off of the ride from the Disney parks, Jungle Cruise. And I didn't really think we needed a movie like this, to be honest. It just didn't. It just sounded like another Dwayne Johnson vehicle. Just sounded way too similar to things that he's done before, like the Jumanji movies mainly. And the trailers, for the most part, just didn't really excite me too much. They just didn't really do anything. It didn't look too funny. It didn't look too adventurous. It just looked like another generic movie. And this movie overall is okay. It's watchable. It's entertaining. But when you really start thinking about it, obviously it's not a good movie. But just as long as you turn your brain off, it can be interesting. It can be fun. So anything that works in this movie, honestly, the performances for the most part are actually really good. Mainly from Dwayne Johnson and Emily Blunt. They really play off each other really well in this movie. Like for every joke that Dwayne Johnson has about Emily Blunt, she has one that's equally as funny. And their chemistry surprisingly really works for this movie. I'm actually really surprised by them. Also, Jack Whitehall, who plays Emily Blunt's brother in this movie, he's really good for the most part. He also has a few really good comedic lines. Also, some very serious moments in this movie. Won't spoil them here, of course. Also, Jesse Plemons as the villain. He was the right amount of camp for the villain of the movie. As far as some of the other performances, like Paul Giamatti, he's in this, another paycheck gig after Gunpowder Milkshake. Edgar Ramirez is another villain in this movie. They didn't really do too much for me. They were just there. They were just doing a paycheck gig. Oh well. I would say that the movie overall, it's the right amount of campiness and seriousness, whereas like it knows when to be campy and it knows when to take itself seriously, but it's never overtly serious. Like something like, say, Snake Eyes last week, which was just so dull and boring and it's just not one funny bone in its movie. It was a relief to see a movie that isn't necessarily great, but at least it didn't take itself too seriously, so that was really good. Also, this movie can be surprisingly fun, even funny. Even some of the puns in this movie actually work. If you've ever been on the Jungle Cruise ride, you would know that there's a lot of puns on that ride. Sometimes really annoying puns. And they do make a lot of puns in this movie, but it never becomes ridiculous. It never becomes like the main source of jokes in this movie. So it's like, okay, pun, we get it. It's like, oh, that's an homage to the actual ride. We get it. And to the movie's credit, they do actually use some of the puns from the ride, which I thought was a nice touch. And overall, the movie it can be surprisingly fun. Again, once you turn your brain off, for someone who can't really turn their brain off while watching the movie, it can be surprisingly fun. And it's also pretty creative with a lot of its production design and its twists in the story. There were a lot of surprises in the story that I actually didn't see coming, so really good on them. As far as any cons, not every joke works. It's typical for a movie that's supposed to be a comedy. Not every joke in this movie lands. Sometimes it's kind of a groaner joke. But for the most part, it's still pretty funny. Also, the CGI. The CGI is not really that great, to be honest. Like, even though, like, say, in the Lion King remake, a movie that I despise, at least the visuals were pretty interesting in this movie. This does not look great, to be honest. It doesn't look really that well done. It's like, this movie was delayed a full year, and you couldn't fix the CGI on this. Like, there's a scene where Dwayne Johnson actually fights a tiger, like, literally fights a tiger, and it just looks so ridiculous that I was kind of laughing because of how ridiculous it looked, not because of how funny it was in the actual movie. Also the main plot of the movie. The plot of this movie is way too convoluted for a movie like this. As fun as it can be, this movie's just way too convoluted. It's like it has all these elements, all these characters, and it just feels like we're trying to have all this at once, and it just, at points in this movie, I'm just like lost because it's like, okay, explain that. And just, I feel like it could have just had a simple plot, but no, we just had to really we had to really go there. We had to go the extra mile. Well, you should go the extra mile in different ways, not in a convoluted plot. And I just feel like Jean-Claude Serra, as a director, he didn't really do anything to elevate the material. All he can basically say with this movie is that he's seen other movies. Like, this movie is very referential to movies such as The Mummy, for instance. Like, the main plot of The Mummy, except it takes place in a jungle instead of a desert. Oh God! And also, like, James Newton Howard's score, it didn't really impress me too much, to be honest. It just felt like they were ripping off Indiana Jones. That's all I'll say. At times, it just feels like the movie is, for the most part, paying homage, but there's a difference between homage and ripoff. And sometimes it kind of came close to being a ripoff, but Jungle Cruise is at least enough of its own story to at least be like, hey, we're our own thing. We're just kind of borrowing elements from other movies that we're inspired by. But, oh well. I just think a better director could have handled this material a lot more than Jean-Claude Serra. But overall, Jungle Cruise, that's a lot of fun. Like, just as long as you turn your brain off, it's a lot of fun. The Dwayne Johnson and Emily Blunt are really good. Most performances are fine. It can be really fun. It's very creative. The production design's great. I just feel like, again, CGI is not too great. Not every joke is funny. Plot is way too complicated at times. And I just feel like it just almost crossed the line with its references. Mainly its homages to other movies that this was clearly based off of. I'm going to give Jungle Cruise 2.5 out of 4 stars. Stream it. And now you can with Disney Plus. I almost thought it was Paramount Plus. What is wrong with me? So, what did you think of Jungle Cruise? Did you enjoy it? Are you going to see it in theaters or on Disney Plus? Also, what has been the last great adventure movie you saw? I don't know. Comment down below. Subscribe to the channel. This is Pat, and stay safe.